Our first three examples today are going to involve non-continuous compounding interest. And the problems are going to sound something like this. How much interest is earned, or what's the final amount in the account if you invest a certain amount of money for a certain number of years at a certain interest rate, compounded annually, compounded semi-annually, compounded daily, monthly, yearly. It'll be something like that. Okay? Compounding is how often they apply the interest to the money. If they do it yearly, they put the entire interest rate in the year. Boom, done. All right. If it's a 6% interest rate and they do it semi-yearly, that's twice a year, they do half of it at 6 months, they do the other half at a year. The reason that's different is because once you apply the interest at 6 months, now you have more money. So now they're applying the interest rate, the other 3%, to a higher amount of money. So if you compound it, it's going to make the money grow more rapidly. All right. And the formula is right here. A equals P times 1 plus R over N to the NT power. As always, when we're going to use any kind of formula, it's very important that we understand what all the variables represent. So there are 5 variables in this formula. All those variables have meaning. And the final amount of the investment, the initial amount of investment, okay, that's how much money you start off with, that's how much money you end up with. R is the interest rate as a decimal. So if they say 5%, go 0.05. If they go 12%, 0.12. And be careful, I'm just going to write this down. Tell you what, it's bored sometimes. You just throw this out. 5% is 0.05, right? And 12% is 0.12. Be careful that 5% is 0.05, not 0.5. If you think 5% is 0.5 and you end up working in a bank, tell me there. Tell me where it is. I'll put my money in your bank. So I'll be making lots. 50%, yeah. You get a 50% interest rate? Yeah. How long does it take your money to double? About a week and a half. And after about a month or two, you're going to be like really rich. And then you take your money out before they figure out the mistake. That's the way to go. It's very dishonest, but don't do that. Anyway, but single digit percentage, make sure you get that 0 in there. If you don't, you're going to get a really wrong answer. And if you get a really wrong answer, that's pretty obvious. Tyler invests $1 million. How long does it take his money to double? 3.2 days. That's probably wrong. So you're probably the wrong answer to hit it. So again, keep that in mind. N is the number of times it's compounded annually. So again, if it's annually, that's once. Semi-annually, twice. Quarterly, 4 times. Daily, 365 times. Hourly, whatever 365 times 24 is, because there's that many hours, 8,760 if I remember right. They say minutely or secondly. I don't even want to try that number in my head. But anyway, keep that in mind. And then T is the number of years. So typically you're going to invest for a certain number of years. That's what's going to happen in these problems. So we're going to use this formula every time. Notice what happens when you compound. All right, so let's say this is 100, for example. It seems like kind of a ridiculous number because we have to go to the 100 times T power, right? We're also taking the interest rate divided by 100, so we're making the interest rate really, really tiny. So if you start off with a 0.05 divided by 100, now it's 0.0005 right here. So we're taking a much smaller number to a much higher power. So they kind of work their way out. It does make the number bigger, but not a whole lot bigger. All right, so example 1. Find the balance. Balance would be the final amount of money you get if $1,000 is invested at an annual interest rate of 10% for 2 years compounded annually. So what I want to do here is I want to establish what they're asking me to find. If it says find the balance, that means we don't know A. So A is equal to question mark. Okay. I see the word compounded annually. Okay, it does not have the word continuously in there. Okay, so we're going to continue to use this compounded a certain number of times formula. The formula says very specifically A equals P parentheses 1 plus R over N to the NT power. If I need to find A, that means I have to know all 4 of these other variables. So I'm going to identify each of those things in this problem. So that's what I kind of want to do in each of these problems. I want to pick apart the problem and find out the information. So how much money are we investing? $1,000. Okay, what's the interest rate?
10%.
10%. We want to write that as a decimal, which would be 0.1 or 0.10 if you wish. I'm fine with 0.1. How often are we compounding?
Annually.
Annually, which means once a year. All right, so that means N equals 1. And how many years are we going to do this for? 2 years. Okay, so if they're asking for the balance, you should be given all that information. Sometimes it's given numerically, $1,000, 10%. Sometimes it's given in words, 2 years. And sometimes it's implied, annually means once a year, semi-annually twice a year, quarterly 4 times a year. The rest of them are pretty straightforward. Daily, 365 times a year. So if I try and work this out, then A equals 1,000 times 1 plus 0.1 over 1 to the 1 times 2 power. That's just substituting numbers into the formula. If I beautify it up a little before I actually stick it in my calculator, 1,000. What does 1 plus 0.1 over 1 equal?
1.1.
1.1, right?
Yeah.
And what does 1 times 2 equal? 2. So just like that, we're going to get all that, 1.1 to the second power times 1,000. We punch all that in our calculator, and I'm going to guess $1,210.
Yep.
Basically, it's 11 squared, move the decimal point 2 spaces, 1.21 times 1,000. But if it isn't that easy, just know that we can type it in our calculator exactly as it's written here. So I've got 1,000 times 1.1 squared. And it spits out the right answer for us. Okay? So again, apply the correct formula, put all the correct numbers into the correct formula, you get the correct answer. Okay? The other thing they may ask about a question like this, they might ask how much interest was earned on the account. If they ask that question, interest is simply how much more money you had than you started off with. We started with 1,000, we ended up at 1,210, so the amount of interest earned here is $210. Okay, they didn't ask that this time, but in the homework I think sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. So just know that the types of questions they're going to ask, typically they ask for the balance, all right? And that's how you handle that.